to start the first session, and we go immediately in depth on of our discussion. And I'm really delighted to introduce to you Stefan Hermans, who is the Director of the European Commission in the Department of Education and Youth, Sports and Culture. And we immediately start to discuss about the topics that I mentioned in my brief introduction. It means the future developments in education policies that are very, very relevant, especially today and tomorrow. So I know that I would like to thank you, Stefan, if I may, to call you with your name, because I know that you are very busy and that you have to go back immediately to Brussels. So I would kindly ask you to ask your questions immediately after the keynote of Dr. Hermans, so that he can reach the airport on time. So, Stefan, over to you, and thank you very much for your speech. Thank you.
No, thank you, Roberto. Thank you very much. And also thanks to Invalsi, to you, Roberto, but also to Patricia for having me here, for having us here as the European Commission. I have to run away very quickly, but I actually have two colleagues here, Daniele and Marco. Maybe if you get up and people know if you have any complaints about the European Commission, we can listen. Okay. There you are, and I speak fluently Italian, by the way, much better than I do. So really happy to be with you. Obviously, I know Roberto already since a while as well, because no surprise that we work very closely together with Italy, particularly also on trying to improve the level of education. And this is where the question of data comes in. Now, I must say, indeed, Brussels is a little bit strange at this moment in time. It's not simply because of the European Council. But you do know that after you went to vote this summer, then there is a new European Parliament, and after that, there is also a change of the guard in the Commission. So there's also a new team coming in. So and we are now in a position where we have to prepare new commissioners, vice presidents, and whatever fancy titles that they have, to do their oral exam with the European Parliament. And it actually is the toughest moment for any commissioner. That is actually to sit the exam that they will have what's called a hearing within the European Parliament, which will take place in the first half of November. So we're actually preparing the ones coming in, but we're also wrapping up the loose ends that we still have from the outgoing Commission. So every 5 years we go to this transition, and it's a bit of a madhouse, as you can imagine. So actually I have now a moment of peace to be coming here, even when I have to run back. Now, what's relevant as well here, I think, for what we are doing and what you are doing is that the question of data for education and data in education is very much at the core of what we're doing in the sphere of education. And it's also, I think, important to see this in the political context in which we operate. And during the Belgian presidency last year, so Belgium was having the presidency of the Council of Ministers, they drew up Council conclusions, so conclusions agreed upon by the representatives of the member states, or national level, regional level, depending on the area of competence when it comes to education, to actually hammer out that we need to work on the basis of evidence-informed decision-making. So not evidence-based, but evidence-informed decision-making. And this is a very noble principle, isn't it? It's also very great ambition. But you also know that you do need data, reliable data, trustworthy evidence. You also know that sometimes easier said than done. But you also need the other thing, and that is that policymakers, political decision makers, that they are open for actually taking on board evidence. Okay? And I think many of you will have enough experience to know that's also easier said than done. Because when you speak about education, ideology is never very far away, right? I think that's what you see in many instances. So in the end, I think for our education systems, our practices, the ones that we want, it's also societal, it's an economic choice. It's a choice that is being made. It just doesn't happen by itself. It's a choice that is being made. And the same holds true actually for Commission proposals, for actions, for policies. Yes, they are rooted in evidence that there's also a question of political viability. What are you willing to spend your political capital on? But there is also clearly a message of political preferences that come in here. So how do we work together within the European Union on this? We do have fancy terminology, right? You're very good at jargon. So we work under the banner of what's called the European Education Area. And the European Education Area is a single policy and funding framework that we have. And that is to establish a genuine common space, but also to have local places for quality education and the equity in quality education, for training, also for lifelong learning, and this across the borders. And it consists of, yes, a number of characteristics, strategic priorities being one of them, priorities for cooperation at the level of the European Union, so transnational cooperation, how member states interact with one another, but also for measures that actually should help to adapt national education systems. Sometimes also used by the ugly word of reform, which I know many people hate, so that's why sometimes we speak also about adaptation. It is how to adjust systems to be able to capture also and embrace the new characteristics in which we are living. But there are also actions here at the level of the EU, that's to support the member states. That is very importantly for many countries as well, the mobilization of financial resources from the level of the European Union. And then there is also a reform governance and system that we have, a framework that we have in which we do organize our cooperation. And I kept for the last for what you're here, and that is we do work also with data. We even work with quantified objectives, with targets at the level of the EU. Just zooming in for one moment first on strategic priorities. So what is it really that drives us in that agenda? What is it around which we believe that working together at the level of the EU can actually be beneficial for the functioning within the member states? And one of them, I think, is clearly on the quality of the education and the equal access to the quality of the education. And we do know how incredibly difficult that is. Patricia said it, I think, at the very beginning. It is really a major preoccupation, and I'm afraid you will hear me say this a few more times this morning here. So on quality education, the equity in education, inclusion in education, success for all, I mean, it is really a major driving force around which we want to work together with the member states. We do this from a perspective of lifelong learning. So you start very early, but up to in adulthood. So we look at it as a totality and the development of an individual within this. We also, obviously, coming from the EU, we have a keen interest on trying to maximize the possibilities of mobility so that you can learn in different education systems, have different opportunities, both for students but also for teachers for that. We obviously zoom in significantly on the teaching profession and the role of the teacher. We do know that this is a tough job. That's a job that is under pressure. There's not just shortage of teachers, but it's also a working environment with some people would certainly, as a teacher, prefer actually to be better than the conditions under which they're working right now. And obviously, we also have an entire chapter dedicated to higher education. So yes, just to repeat that, I mean, the lifelong learning perspective, and we operate with quantified objectives, with targets that we have, and that takes me to the fact that we also have a monitoring system that we put in place that actually enables us to look from a 360-degree view on education systems comparatively at the level of the EU, but also within each and every member state. And I think, Roberto, you can testify that typically your colleagues from the European Commission have a pretty good idea what's going on in your country. That often comes as a surprise to people within the member states. But I'm proud to say that with colleagues like Daniela and Marco, that we're actually capable of having that kind of insight. And I think it's important for the interaction that we can have with one another to actually align our position and to work toward that common goal, and is to improve learning outcome at the end of the day. But what I also wanted to say is that within that sphere that we do have, which we call in the European education area, that is also the bridge that we have to be engaged in the much broader policy agenda of the European Union. And that is, what kind of socio-economic change do we need for our society, for our economy? And particularly, what is the role of education and training within that? And this we do, and sorry, your jargon, this is what we do within what is called the European semester. Okay? Some of you typically will know that is that the Commission says that you actually should spend less money in Italy. They say this also to the country that I know best. There may be sometimes something good, maybe something not. But that's the part of the discussion. That's also why it's interesting to live in a democracy, right? But my point is that of the activity that we do within the European education area and the capacity to actually argue your case on the basis of reliable, trustworthy data, that others can verify that it actually is true what you're saying, and that it makes sense to take it on, that we also have managed to have a prominent role within that European semester system. So in the last edition, there were then country-specific recommendations, that is kind of a policy message addressed to a member state. So we had recommendations addressed on education and training to 18 member states out of the 27. I know some would love to have a recommendation because they think it's helpful. Some hate to have a recommendation because the minister that will think is the opposition is going to criticize me, as if it's only that one minister is responsible for everything, right? But the bottom line of this is that it helps us, it helps you, that's also the intention, to actually put education where it has to be, and that's really at the center of our socio-economic agendas, and what we can do also to build our future. Now, on those 18, no surprise, I mean, a significant number were actually dealing with the question of basic skills and the acquisition of basic skills. Now, it is then not only a message of what you put in kind of a political discourse and council, country-specific recommendations. What is very important for many member states is the way that it actually helps to trigger EU funding to support national investment. Okay. Now, just to say something on budget, I guess, like me, you all love the Erasmus Plus program, right? Now you say yes to this, okay, very good. So this is worth 26 billion euro for a period of 7 years. But if you look on cohesion funding for the same period, this is like 33, 34 billion euro. These are then typically national regional envelopes that can be invested in education. And these are questions that may go in infrastructure. These are questions that will be going in the way you help on teacher training. There are a whole lot of things that you can actually do with that. But on top of that, and that's where really I want to come to as well, is when you look at the recovery and the resilience facility, in this package that we have been putting together at the level of the EU to support member states in the post-COVID period, there's like more than 75 billion euro, about 13%, 13% of the total envelope that has been available has been geared towards education and training. And if it wouldn't have been for this close cooperation between the Commission and the member states, data-driven, okay, within the European semester, this would have never materialized. And I know there's many things you can say about the recovery and resilience facility, like on everything else in life, but I think it is a very important message. I think also for the period to come, I think we are in now for probably the most difficult year for many to come, as to how we identify the role of education and the needs of the education community to also trigger money, for which we know that there is an increased competition right now. Think about security issues and everything else that comes with it. Okay. So on top of that, so I've now explained that the European education area doesn't live on an island, but also I think it's very important to underline that when it comes to education, we actually have a rather sophisticated governance system. I've failed my entire professional life to explain this to any politician how it works, because essentially what it means is that we do not only have a close cooperation with public authorities, but we also have to engage the education community as such within it. There are experts who clearly play a role in there, but you also have representatives in civil society. I think, for instance, parents associations, for instance, I mean, very important issue. I mean, ask any teacher to what extent they love some of the parents who come to school. Okay. That will give you immediately an example of what I think about all of that. But also, for instance, when it comes to the role of the social partners, but also those who are actually in the field, headmasters and teachers. And clearly, I think this is an area where more can and should be done, of actually really having the echo of those who are on the ground, who are in the practice, to participate. It's something that we're really looking at more closely also for the next round of cooperation that we will have. To put it differently, as much as it will be argued that education within the European Union, it is a soft competence, but the goal is clearly that it needs to have a hard impact in the sense that it actually does improve the learning situation, the learning outcome, and what happens within the classroom. Data, right? That's what brings you here. Something on data. Now, well, numbers are nice, but yeah, then what? What do you do with that? Now, obviously for us, what matters is that they help us to get an understanding, to have an insight, not just in the situation, but also on factors that explain it and actually even can help us to think of policy that can improve the situation that we're looking at. Now, I guess every one of you here in Italy has heard of the Draghi report on the situation of the European Union, okay? Also, Mr. Draghi pointed out how important it is that you actually work with trustworthy evidence, with data that you can have faith in, that they are right. And that you need to be guided by that. Not that it overtakes you, but at least that it helps you to move forward on that. And I'll give you a couple of examples of why Mr. Draghi is right on that, and why we can actually prove that he is right on some of this. Now let me look one example, and this is related to the quantified objectives, the targets that we have at the level of the European Union. So we have one, and it is about early school leaving. And it's actually about reducing the level of early school leaving. We used to have a target on that, not more than 10%. Council has changed it now to not more than 9%. But we do have a target, the idea being, let us prioritize that when kids go to school, that they actually also graduate. And you know, this is key, because this is the bridge to the labor market, okay? Whether you have or you don't have a qualification at the end of that, is a very crucial determinant on your access to the labor market and your further transition on the labor market. Hopefully that is one, right? Now, we have this target set, this benchmark set at the level of the European Union, and this is clearly one where we can demonstrate that over time, if you focus your mind and if you put the required ingredients in policy guidance, financial resources with it, that it actually will take you where you want to be. That is that you reduce early school leaving. Just to give you some numbers, in the period from 2013 until 2023, on average in the EU, early school leaving dropped from 11.8% to 9.5%. Clearly big differences between the member states. I pick out two. When you look at a country like Spain, okay, they started out about 23.7% in 2013. In 2023, this was 13.7. When you look at Portugal, 18.8, 7.3. These are massive trajectories of improvement. It's not just because there was a target, but it's also because the target triggered to set your mind to it. We had, this policy initiative at the level of the EU that we do certain things together at the EU. So we had a council recommendation with policy guidance, and it actually asked member states to also think of a national strategy to go and deliver on that. On the basis of that, it also triggered the way money was being allocated in the envelopes that we have on cohesion funding. For Spain and Portugal, this has been absolutely very crucial. In the same way that we see those developments taking place right now, still with the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and you know everything about this, so I won't say much on this, because you're completely involved in actually also pushing this down here within Italy. Now, I've given you a good example, right, where it actually works, but, okay, let's be honest with one another, there are also areas where we can't say that yet. Okay, I hope the word yet fits here. If we look at the low levels of basic skills, the PISA data, right? So PISA 2022, so basically when you look at math, close to 1 out of 3, 15 years old, no basic math. Reading science, 1 out of 4. A trend that actually has gotten worse, certainly for math, over the last years. So a declining trend. And you do know, When you start low, it is difficult to recuperate, difficult to catch up. And what you want, if you don't associate learning with success, it's not the first thing you feel attracted to. If you're trying to struggle to survive, I mean, think of all those people who go out to work either very early in the morning and then maybe still late in the evening. And then you have to try to put the training in there. I mean, good luck, while you also have to watch your children and your aging mother. I mean, good luck. It's very difficult. And we do see this, as much as we love to speak about adult learning and lifelong learning, that when you start, the difficulty, it is really difficult to catch up on that. So there's a question here, not just of fairness, but clearly also I think there's an issue for our economy. I mean, if you would have people here representing the small and medium-sized enterprises, they would tell you how difficult it is for them to recruit anyone who they can actually work with. I mean, even at a cash register sometimes people don't calculate. I mean, it's very difficult. If you need to have somebody who places your windows but they can't measure it, they can't put them in properly because they don't understand how to do this, I mean, it's very difficult. So even at that level, I mean, there's a fairness issue, but there's clearly also an economic issue that you can see here. And the worst is the trend has been negative. So we have not seen improvement in that. And yes, I know there's many things you can say about the PISA data, okay, but I think they're very critical about themselves and really up to date on doing this. But it gives you a very strong indicator that there is something. I think that we do observe in reality as well, that we have quite some of our young generation who, when it comes to math, but also science, reading, who really have difficulties in basically functioning illiterate. On top of that, and I think for us within the EU, and I think Mr. Draghi will certainly agree on that, when you look at the competitiveness of our economy, and how we do with competing nations, then if we can't catch up there, it is very difficult, I think, for our prosperity and actually sharing that prosperity within our society. So that's one. But Mr. Draghi also made a lot of reference to the STEM skills. And also here we see that there is significant room for improvement within the European Union. So Draghi referred also here to the innovation gap. And when we're looking now at the low levels, but also let us look at the high performers. When you see that when it comes within the sphere of science, etc., and math, you see that only about 7% of our young generation are top performers. That is a very small group now. So these will be the ones that we have to rely upon on actually make the breakthrough, who actually will be the innovators, who actually will be the ones who advance. So these will have to take the lead, right? I mean, that's what you would expect from them. But if you see that also this is a shrinking group, that's actually something that should make us feel concerned to do on this. I mean, also this idea that you have a thing like digital natives. I mean, you're discovering that maybe it sounds very nice, but unfortunately it is not true, okay? Watching TikTok does not mean that you're good on your digital skills, okay? Who would have thought that, right? I mean, would have never crossed your mind. But on this, what we clearly see is that we also have a long way to go on that. And then clearly on this mismatch that we see, including also at the levels of higher education. Now we're also looking, for instance, how many STEM graduates do we have? It's a bit more than 1 out of 4 when they leave School of Higher Education, university level education, who actually have a diploma within the STEM field. So that is not on a par with what the economy is actually requesting. And I know you can have a dedicated session on that, on how exactly you measure that, in what field that actually comes into account. But I think the bottom line of the story is that there is somewhere a gap that we need to manage to bridge, and that we need to bridge intelligently, I think on the basis of the data that we do know, and also that we do know the way the economy is turning and how it will be doing. That's what some of the data tells us. But then obviously what we are interested in as well is, how come? So are there any explanatory factors? Are there any leverages that we do find where we can actually act, right? And so what causes it? I mean, I said already twice today, well, socioeconomic background, it remains a very important determinant in most of our member states, but not everywhere. So it is possible to do significantly better than what we have on the average, because there are countries that demonstrate that it actually is possible. Look at a country like Estonia, for instance. So disadvantaged students, because the education level of their parents, books at home, all those kind of things that do play a role. But we also know that the increased diversity is also a challenge within the classroom. And I work in Brussels. If I go a bit further down in the street, you will come in classrooms where there may be 25 to 30 kids. Not a single one speaks the language of the city where we are in Brussels at home. Okay? And there you are as a teacher. And how do you deal with that? I mean, that's also a factor to take into account. So then on top of that, I mean, the teacher shortage, the teaching profession, respect for the teaching profession by society, including by parents, for the teaching profession. So these are clearly also issues that play a role. Think of the difficulties in rural areas, in disadvantaged communities, to actually bring teachers in. Think about the difficulties that one has in most of our member states when it comes to teachers of math, of science. In the part of the country that I know best, there are actually only a few dozen of people who graduate every year in math. And good luck to find many qualified math teachers. Okay. So also on this, I think when you look at this, the challenge that is there, also on the teaching profession, is actually clearly one that is an explanatory factor of what is going on, and it requires our attention. I think over the last period, we also have been drawn more and more into the question of mental health. COVID certainly did not help. So the mental health, we're particularly looking at the pupils, but I think it also is fair to say it's much more broader within the education community. I can agenda to other characteristics that we have, all right, and I can go on for a while. But where I want to go to, though, is it's fair enough to have those data. It's fair enough then to have a better understanding. What do you do then next, right? So within the activities that are being planned for the period to come, it has been announced, and that has been, technically speaking, has been said in the mission letter to our executive vice president who will be responsible for education, that she has to develop and has to put forward an action plan to improve basic skills. Now, if basic skills are continuing to lower, we need to find a way to reverse the trend. And we see activity in quite some member states, at least half a dozen that is already taking different types of measures. But it clearly opens, I think, the door for seeing how we can take advantage of our interaction with one another, to see how we can actually really reverse that trend when it comes to basic skills. And maybe not necessarily it will be miraculous next time that we measure, but hopefully that we can get on a path. And clearly it will also be important here, I think, to listen to the experience of headmasters, of teachers who have seen this within their school, who have done something about it, and who can demonstrate that there are ways of actually moving forward on that. So that's really one of the initiatives that we hope to be able to put on the table relatively soon within the new mandate. So basically to engage the entire education community at the level of the European Union to go and foster the development of those basic skills. I used the word monitoring earlier already once. I want to zoom in on this right now for a second as well. At the level of the European Commission, every year we produce what is called an education and training monitor. So we have a comparative volume, so we look at the EU 27 and then we also look a little bit at main competitors. But we also have a volume per country, per member state. So we have 27 plus 1. So, and what we clearly do there is we go and do not only look at those quantified targets. I only mentioned you now 2 for the time being, but we also look at a whole range of other indicators that can help us not just to sketch, but also to understand what is going on. It's not a political document, it's not a policy document, it's an analytical document to help you understand. And obviously, when you do a report like that, you also want to engage in a discussion with the member states on that, okay? How do you perceive this, what do you see, and how can we then move forward together on this? So this year, the edition will be coming out towards the end of November. It will be a specific theme. This year will be on sustainability. Last year, we had a specific theme on teachers. So this year, it will be on sustainability, also because of the focus that we have on green and the digital transition, so particularly on the green front. What are we really doing there? How strong are we on this? And that takes me, I think, really the overall question of the role of the data monitoring and then eventually evaluation. Okay. What we have noticed is that a cultural evaluation throughout the European Union is not very prominent. In some member states it's more advanced than in others. It's euphemistically that I'm actually saying this right now, because in some of them actually very little. But anyhow, to speak positively, right? So, but this idea that data can help you in evaluating. And I know when you come from the Commission, everybody thinks these are those people again with their finger, waving at you. But I mean, this is not the purpose. I mean, the purpose of evaluating is that it needs to help us to understand how you can move ahead, right? I mean, what is the point of just trying to blame? I mean, there's no point in that. I mean, the point is, how do you make a positive agenda to actually go on the basis of what you do know and that you can demonstrate. So for that, obviously, you need research, you need evidence on this. For us, something that we do pay a lot of attention to, that is that given the complexity that we do have, context is so important. Okay? Copy-paste is not our friend here. Okay? It's not our friend. Because you need to really look at the context in which it operates. So you cannot simply transfer from one place to the other. If you see something positively happen, it can be a sign of inspiration, but you really need to see how it fits in there. You also need to see how expert judgment can play a role in that. And then obviously what you will be discussing, I'm sure, is all the different types of surveys, methodologies that you are using. And that's also something that we are addressing at the level of the EU, and how to see we can engage with the member states on that. The very last thing that I want to say, if there are any researchers within the room, in particular, and if you're from academia also, we have been injecting within the Horizon Europe program, which is the Research and Innovation program, within what is called Cluster 2, more jargon, but at least it helps you to find where it is. We do have a specific destination that's actually geared towards improving research on education. So we actually put in elements around education, coming and call, for which then you can bid like you do, you can apply like you do for any research project, and of which we actually are now seeing when it comes to the data analysis, so that you're really having a driving force on that. So I think there's also an element from our side to try to engage at the level of the European Union, that research community in education, to work together, and it actually has drawn quite some attention to this here as well. And also obviously when you put in research projects like that, you also want to see early stage researchers who are being trained also within the sphere of education, which we also believe is very important. It's taking me to the end of what I wanted to say, and that is that when it comes to evaluation and the evaluation culture, we do have a mechanism, if I may put it like that, that we have set up at the level of the European Union. And we have called it a learning lab for investment in quality education. So it's a learning lab. It's where we try to bring information together to exchange, so that colleagues of the Joint Research Center, for instance, help in providing technical advice to member states. For instance, in a country like Malta, in the meantime, they have set up a whole evaluation department, actually following from this, just to give you one example. But it's also something that has been rooted in a political will, and it's important to underline it too. I mean, it is not just a bureaucrat that has invented it. It's a question of having a political consensus that we need to move in this direction. In 2019, under the Finnish presidency, we had a meeting between education ministers and finance ministers. You know the story, yeah? The finance ministers, they are the one who will be deciding on the budget, and the education one, typically, in most instances, they will receive the number and nobody will ever ask their opinion. I mean, that's sort of to say, it's typically, it's not just for education. Finance minister is powerful, as you know. But the goal of that was also that we do manage those two political levels together, and actually demonstrating that the investment in education, the type of investment and how you invest, that it actually is important. You heard me say about the Recovery and Resilience Facility on the European semester. The data 2019 was also the moment before we did all of this, right? Okay. So finance ministers had already been more convinced of what was possible, because they had been drawn into this debate. The French in 2022, during their presidency, they said we really need to push this further. And this is actually how the Learning Lab has been born. So some of the work we actually do together, we contracted essentially out to the OECD, or the member state asked us to support the OECD in doing that. I mean, high quality research that can be done there is worthwhile. We also have other actors who will contribute to the analysis to make. But what really matters to us is that we can prove this thing together. and that we create a community of people interested in research questions, analysis on education policy, to help us to drive actually the improvement that we are there. So I guess yes, I should, yes. And I hope, let me put it like that, I hope that I've managed to maybe not convince you, but at least demonstrate to you that we take a keen interest at the level of the European Commission in actually have reliable, trustworthy data, that we have a keen interest in working with involving people like you who are present here to actually think together and act together when it comes to data and the use within the sphere of education. So it matters for the individual, it matters for our society, it matters for our economy. So on that, it is a key thing. So, and on that, I really want to conclude. We can only make progress if we manage to work together, that we can interact with one another. And that's also kind of the framework in which we want to operate. In an open spirit, in a respectful spirit, but actually with a common joint interest, and is that we are interested in the quality of our education and that kids have a fair chance in life on that. And I think this is really what's the driving force for us within the Commission to work on those files. And I'm quite sure it must be the same for you. Thank you.